Welcome to the Women in Business radio show with Sian Murphy, connecting women in business around the globe.
Hello and welcome into the Women in Business Radio Show studio. We are live on this lovely, very chilly Thursday morning in the UK. In the studio with me, as usual, is my lovely co-host Adelle. Say hello, Adelle.
Hello.
Have we got your microphone up? Because
am I up?
You're up
this week.
Yes,
I am.
You are on. Also in the studio today we have Berni Morgan. Berni Morgan is the author of The Amazing Life of Cecelia Chatterjee. Yep. I hope I got that right.
You have, yes.
And also, just to add a little bit about Berni is also an experienced businesswoman, aren't you? And you have worked with other businesses, business coaching, business mentoring. Yeah. So I don't like to say not just an author, but actually sort of in the business arena as well. So you're coming at it really from both angles. Yeah. Because what you've written isn't a business book, is it?
No, it's the biography of my great-grandmother, but she was a pioneering female lawyer in India 100 years ago. So she really was somebody who pushed boundaries and forged her own path in life. So she had... she had 4 husbands and 13 children, Sian, so
yes.
She had a lot going on, really.
Busy lady.
Made a good book in a way.
Yeah, I'm currently on my second husband. We'll have to see what happens there. I hope he's not.
Is he listening?
Hope he's not listening in. Okay, what are we going to be talking about today? Do you know, as usual, I have absolutely no idea. What we're going to do, we have some sort of, say, quick-fire questions. We're going to be sort of sucking poor Bernie's brain dry.
That won't take long, Sian.
Everything out that she knows. And then we're going to go on and have a talk around, a discussion around the process of creating a book. Be it a business book or it could be a fiction book. In this case, I think we'd call it a biography, wouldn't we?
Yes, yeah.
You can tell I'm on form today.
Yeah, I'm very impressed.
Can't you? Managed to say biography. So, let's have our quick fire round, shall we, of questions. Who's going to go? I suppose we ought to start with the questions, shouldn't we? So, what have we learnt this week? You can go first. You can go first, Adelle. What have you learnt this week?
For me, it's doing what's right for you. You always fear as you go into January, you are bombarded with emails on new programs, everybody has a view on what you should be doing. That's busy anyway, but going into January, after it's been swamped by it, and I think you have to sit back and go, you still got to do what's right for you. Somebody may be telling you what the new trends are, or everybody's writing a book, or everybody's doing a podcast, everybody's doing a membership, everybody's doing a funnel. That's great, but sit back and still, what I've learned is, what's the problem you're trying to fix, and do what's right for you and your clients, and just take what you need from that and dismiss everything else. It's okay not to follow the emerging trend if it's not for you.
Because you can't do everything. And in fact, we were having a very quick discussion about this before we went on air. I have decided not to write a book because it's just not me. You know, the editing process and everything we're going to hear later on, it's not something that you just sit down and sort of flip out. Not if you're going to create a quality product. I'm not somebody who goes, who can spend years doing one thing. And it was actually quite liberating to say, lots of people are writing books. Lots of people are writing stupendous books. But I don't think it's right for me. My publishing media is somewhere else. And so I made a decision, hey, let's not do that, because it's been on my sort of to-do list to write a business book for years. Well, why am I doing that? Actually, I'm doing it because everybody else is doing it. I'm not really looking forward to it. If I was, it would damn well be done, wouldn't it? There'd be a book out there, it would be published. So I love that. Put it all to one side, don't follow the trend.
Yep.
Okay. Bernie, what have you learnt this week?
Well, of course, we've had New Year this week. Yes, oddly.
Yes,
and
you spotted.
I noticed.
On the ball.
Yeah, as ever.
This is why we got you in.
Yes, exactly. Well, you haven't mentioned it, Sian, so I just wondered,
I'm going to come back to that and why I haven't mentioned it and make myself sound really horrible, actually.
Well, I'll go back to what I learned then, because as Adele was saying, it's all these New Year resolutions and new things. But you haven't mentioned my podcast. I mean, I do a podcast. It's called Amazing Women Invisible Lives, where I interview women about their lives, because quite often women don't get profiles for having sort of incredibly huge achievements in their personal and professional lives. And I asked them for their advice. And when I was reviewing their advice towards the end of last year, I thought, actually, abandon your New Year resolutions and actually take notice what they say, and they give there's a whole compendium of advice there where, if you sort of took that into your life and made that work in your life, it'd be far better than New Year's resolutions. So I've been popping them up on LinkedIn on a regular basis this week so that people can see what this compendium of advice is about, really. Well, there you go.
Like that.
Ooh, I do.
That's compendium as well. I said that.
Okay, biography, compendium.
We're doing it New Year.
I tell you what, when I was in local government, I did do that. We worked in the public sector. We used to have Word of the Week, where we used to we'd pick a word to see if we could get it into a letter that was going out to a member of the public.
I've done that.
The hardest was aardvark. But
did you do it?
Yes. I did. I visited somewhere where they had a stuffed aardvark.
As you do.
Anyway, as you do. You see, now that makes what I've learnt this week sound really boring. But I'm going to talk about it anyway. So what I learnt this week is you don't always find what you need you find what you need sometimes where you don't expect it. Mm-hmm. And so what I found this week in a place where I didn't expect it is this sort of, what would we call that thing that I've got my remarkable writer in it. I've put a pen in it. I've been looking for a folio that I can close up, that I can keep all of my writing tools in, because despite not writing a book, I am a writer.
Yeah.
I do a lot of writing. And I wanted something that I could put my entire thing into, my remarkable, my pad, my dibbers, my pencils, my notes, all of that sort of thing, and take it all with me. I've been everywhere looking for this. I've been on Etsy, I've been on Amazon, I've been trawling shops. Nothing. And then I was in the children's department of IKEA looking for a mat for my grandchild, and I found this thing which zips up, and it's like a little children's art case. It's brilliant. It's bright orange.
Excellent.
But which is not really my colour. It doesn't fit into any brand I've got, but it's bright orange. It's perfect. £9.
It's a portfolio for your oeuvre, then.
It is.
Excellent.
It is, and it is absolutely brilliant.
I think we should all get one, actually.
I tell you what, it is. If you're a businesswoman and you write, this is the thing for you.
Right. Oh, yeah,
it's even got a little hard. What would you call that? Like a little tray that you can write on. So
wow.
I use this on. It's got a little handle.
Oh,
so
I want one.
You see, look, they're there.
Oh,
look.
that's it. Studio. Well,
that's it.
Nice.
I better take a picture of it.
Yeah, I think you should.
I couldn't believe. The stuff that I'd seen on Etsy, and I always try and support small businesses.
Yeah.
And this was lovely, the stuff on Etsy, but it was still sort of, a lot of it was £200 to £300, and it was still not doing what I wanted.
Yeah.
Bright orange, £9, perfect.
Wow, you should have your name on the front. So, if you're okay.
I could. Actually, I should have my name on the front anyway. Listen, I'm a woman who had to have her gloves, had to have string put on her gloves.
Elastic.
Yeah. And we're not talking about when I'm a child. This is. This is, like 60. So you don't always find what you want where you expect to find it.
Yeah, that's true.
I think that applies to an awful lot of stuff.
Yeah.
So what tools have we got this week? Moving on very quickly. So have you got any tools this week that you would recommend, Adele?
I have an existing tool that we were talking about software last week. So I do a lot of screen video records on my phone. And I had several different pieces of software that were all, £8 or £9 a month, which it looks quite cheap.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like much, does it? No,
but one of them, Vimeo, now has screenshots on your phone that you can go straight in and edit. So I do a lot of screen sharing. So by having that one upgrade, I was like, yes, I've got all my videos in one place. I can cancel 2 other subscriptions, and Vimeo had released that a few weeks ago. So all of a sudden, I'm getting very quick on updating them. But again, it's just, sometimes you just dismiss those. But I thought, no, I'm going to sort that out. And he did. And I was actually really impressed with it. So I've been doing lots of videos this week, all in one place.
Tell me again what it does. So you've got the Vimeo app on your phone.
On my phone. So I click on the app and it says, do you want to record a video or do you want to record your phone? So I now press record my phone. So I've got an app that I use with my clients. So I actually went in and recorded myself using the app, and then I created a very, very quick how-to guide. Unfortunately, I used to have to use another 2 pieces of software to do that, but Vimeo's clearly now realised what they're doing and pulled it all in one place. So it just makes my life so much easier and quick.
Yes, and I use Vimeo as well, and I didn't realise that it did that. And I think we mentioned this a little while ago, didn't we, as a top tip, which was, if you're already using a tool, keep an eye on the updates, because very often we just carry on using them. We don't appreciate that actually they've built in something else, which is either a minor upgrade or it's within the price or whatever you've already got. Check out what your existing stuff is already doing. Look at those emails. I'm afraid I very often delete them.
And I cancelled two subscriptions that were coming up for annual plan reviews. So it's made a difference. And more importantly, just from an efficiency point of view, it's all in one place.
And it's all on one app.
Yep.
Okay.
That's my tool.
You've got a tool. Bernie, the tool can be anything. So it could be a shovel.
Right.
It could be an app. It could be absolutely anything that you use that you think other people might find useful.
Yeah. Well, the one I use quite a lot, and I know it's been around a long time, it's in Windows 10. It's Photos. I don't know if you use Photos in Windows 10. It's a built-in.
I don't have Windows.
Right.
Broken.
Oh, okay. Right. If you do.
I can't. That's something else I'm not allowed to use. I keep throwing it across the room.
Oh, yes. Well, I've done that once or twice. But in the Photos app, which is built in, as I say, to the Microsoft Windows 10, you can put lots of different photos. You can make small films. So the small films that I make and put up on LinkedIn are all done in that, really. And you just have to learn how to use it in a way that, you put the various different music behind it, and you put various different titles, and then you time each. But because you say make a half a second or a second of one picture into another, it looks like a film. So as you go through,
so you've taken your photos, you've got your images. Somehow you've got a picture, and you can link them together. A little bit of music, make them a little bit more interesting,
bit of text,
and create a little video.
Yeah, and I don't do them much more than 20 seconds because a lot of platforms don't take much more than 20 seconds. But you can get a little video with music behind it, and say with the key messages that you want to do. And it's already built in to, say if you use Windows 10, it's there.
So it's in Windows 10, and what's the function in there called?
Photos.
So just in Photos.
I mean, although you make the films with it, it's Photos.
It's called Photos.
Yeah. And you can pull them down. The photos, the images can come from the web, or they can come from your own device, really.
See, and I bet that's something else. How many people use Windows 10? Cracky millions. That sometimes don't realise that actually there's that little bit of functionality in there.
And it's easy to use.
Okay, thank you. So that's 2 ways of creating little videos, little dynamic content. Mine's got nothing to do with that at all. Mine is audiobooks, be it Audible or... what's that thing that goes across the world? Libby, which is that network, which if you're associated with a local library, very often they will have Libby and you can get audiobooks and ebooks on them. But I'm not suggesting that you go and listen to business books. I'm suggesting that audiobooks are actually something to help with insomnia. In fact, I think they can actually get rid of insomnia.
Really?
Do not laugh.
No, sorry. Don't. I need one, if not 6.
Okay, don't laugh. It works. It works for me, and I think it works for a lot of other people as well. Okay. So, very often when you have insomnia, there are an awful lot of solutions. Don't look at your phone, don't do this, pack up doing that, drink this, don't drink that, all sorts of things. Have hot baths, so many solutions, aren't there? But I still find that what's happening is I'm lying there, my brain's churning, stuff's happening, and mainly I'm going, oh my goodness me, I have to go to sleep. I'm going to sleep. It's going to be awful tomorrow morning. I don't know. Well, by listening to an audiobook, not a business book, not anything that you actually ought to listen to, something that you want to listen to, a story generally works for me. Even if you can't get to sleep, come on, never mind, I'm sitting here, I'm listening to something that I'm enjoying listening to.
Yeah.
And I find I go to sleep.
But do you miss the story then, or do you?
Yes. Yes.
The key parts of the plot.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, you do. But the object of the exercise is actually not to listen to the story.
Oh.
So, but what then happens is, because I will still sometimes wake up during the night. Normally I'll wake up very often about 3 o'clock. So what I'll do is I'll then, and Audible I think is best for this, I'll then backtrack to where I think I got to, put it back on.
Yeah.
And I have looked at my phone. So anybody who's going, we shouldn't look at your phone. I tell you what, and the phone's on my pillow. All right.
Yeah.
I'll go back and I'll start it again on where, whatever chapter I think I got to. And off I go again, and I go back to sleep. And for me, it really does work. And it was only recently that I found out this works for other people as well.
Right.
And you can buy headphones. You can buy headphones that are built into a headband. So if you are sleeping, if you have a partner, if you're sleeping with somebody else, or for whatever reason you can't play an audio book out loud, this is a really good way of doing it as well. So you can get a private headphone, you can listen to it, and there you go.
Wow. Okay.
I find that works. It's the only thing that has ever worked for me, actually.
Right.
And I've tried it all. I've tried essential oils. I've tried creams, potions, lotions, food. You name it.
Yeah.
I've done hypnosis. Everything. That works.
Right.
And I haven't had a sleepless night now for 2 years.
Goodness me.
So there you go.
I think, that's a really good tool of the week.
Well,
Yeah.
but the key is it has to be something that you enjoy,
want to do,
because then you can go, okay, well, I may not be asleep, but you know what? I'm listening. I'm really enjoying what I'm listening to.
Yeah. Brilliant.
I've run out now. What do we normally talk about now? We've done the tools, we've done the book, and what have we learnt this week?
That's it. No, it's the book.
Oh, we haven't done the book, have we?
No.
Okay, book.
Bit predictable, but every January I always get out my 7 Habits to Highly Effective People, and I always go back through that. And it's not because I need to remind myself. I always find every year I go back in and I go up a level. I just think of it differently. So that is always my January go-to book.
Ooh.
Have you got a book?
I'm reading a book at the moment, yes, by Craig Brown, called Princess Darling, and it's the story of Princess Margaret. It's the biography of Princess Margaret. And what I'm marvelling about it is she clearly has no redeeming features. She's clearly utterly ghastly to everybody, her family, her friends.
You know where you stand, though, don't you?
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting, but how does he write a whole book and make it engaging about somebody who doesn't seem to have any facets other than that to her character? Because otherwise, characters, people are good, bad, indifferent, have different reactions to things, and she clearly doesn't. And it's fascinating, and it's a brilliant insight into the 60s and 70s, and another insight into the class structure in this country, which people have said has broken down. I'm not sure it has done myself, but was very, very entrenched in the 60s and 70s, so fascinating. Yeah.
Can I put a little bit of a different angle on that, actually?
Yes, you can.
It is that it could be that the view that you're getting is because of the author.
Yes.
That it may... There's a book I read a long time ago, and I've read it several times since, and it's called Tacitus, believe it or not. It's by a guy called Tacitus, and it's called The Annals of Imperial Rome.
Right.
Okay, and it's about the Roman emperors that go through from... it doesn't really matter, like Octavian, Augustus, all of that sort of thing, that sort of era. But he was writing it 100 years later, and he was writing it at a time where he was living under an emperor that really wasn't particularly cuddly. And it really seriously skewed his reporting of that history. Yes. And so you look at it, and some of the things that happened may be true, but you can't put too much reliance on the character and what he's picked out to talk about.
I think that's really true, and I think my master's degree was in that sort of women's perspective of literature. So we did a lot of critical theory, totally boring around literature, but from a women's perspective, and looked at most of the overriding perspectives of men. So, and obviously he's a bloke, so there is that to it. And I sort of read everything now with an eye to that. But I think the other thing that he does, and he's written a book about the Beatles in a similar vein, which came out last year and was really popular, is that he reads all the biographies
So he's like doing a bit of a meta. He's like doing a meta-analysis of it all and pulling it all together. Yes, okay.
And then he'll say this incident, so-and-so said this, so-and-so said that. And he also reads the servants' biographies. Apparently most royal biographers don't read servants' biographies. And he's read all of those as well. So he's put in all those perspectives.
I hadn't even thought of it from that point of view, that somebody who is working as a servant in... That sounds like a terrible term, doesn't it?
But it is a terrible term, but it is.
Yes, okay. That's working like that would create a biography. Of course, I mean, crikey. I mean, that's the best thing you could possibly do, actually.
Inside scoop.
Absolutely. So he does all of that. Like so it's an amalgam. Now, equally, it will have his perspective on it, and I do agree with that. But it's an amalgam of all these things.
Though, isn't it, if he's getting his detail.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's worth a read and see what you think about it. You know, it's great fun.
What was it again?
I think it's called Princess Darling, and it's Craig Brown is the author. So it's something Darling. It might be Margaret Darling, but I don't know. Anyway,
and
it's memorable. Anyway, Sian.
And no redeeming features. I just love that.
That's my view. He doesn't say that, in fairness. No. I've gleaned
That's your interpretation. I just love that. I've always got to read it, haven't I? Make me feel better.
You think I have lovely eyes, though.
You could say, you think I'm bad.
Exactly.
Read this.
Oh, dearie. Okay, so we've... I have a book. I do have a book. The book that I'm reading at the moment, I'm actually reading Tim Ferriss' Tribe of Mentors.
Oh, brilliant.
Which is, I'm listening to it on audiobook, actually. And it's one of the reasons that I mentioned that thing about insomnia, because I thought I was the only person who ever did that. And, I can't remember who it was. Somebody in there actually said that they used this as a cure for insomnia. And I thought, actually, do you know, perhaps I'm not as daft as I sound. Somebody else is doing it. But it's just a compilation of people who have done well, have achieved things, and it's a set series of questions. I think they copied us. I think Tim Ferriss. I think he's come in.
It's a brilliant book.
I think Tim Ferriss. He's copied us with the questions that we ask every week. Obviously, he didn't. You know, he just listened in and stole it. It's really, really good, and he is asking them the same questions. So he's asking all of these different people the same questions, and it's an easy read, and it's an inspiring read as well.
Okay. Sounds great.
Yeah, no, it is. It's really, and it's quite as an audiobook, you really get a bang for your buck. Buck for your bang for your buck. It's about 18 hours long.
Gosh, right.
And it's a really good sort of lovely dip in, get some ideas, get some inspiration. It's good. So that's what I'm up to. What should we talk about now? Should we go over and talk about books, do you think? Or should we find something? What else should we talk about? Do you know, one day I'm going to write this down and we're going to organise it properly. I think we should talk about creating books. I think the new year, I think a lot of people are perhaps setting new goals, setting new things, new ideas, new things that they're going to be doing over the next few years. This year, it's been a tricky couple of years, isn't it? And I think perhaps it is a time for some people to be creating a book. So, Berni.
Ooh.
Yes. You are a businesswoman. One might have expected you to create a book around being in business. You also support business people. So the logical thing is, or assumption is, perhaps that you would create a book around business. But you haven't, have you?
No. And I've never done creative writing before, so I was moving away. In business, you do writing, don't you? You write various
yes, you do.
Publications or whatever policies and whatever in the world that I worked in. So I was moving away to creative writing, and I did that because this story of my great-grandmother had been percolating in my brain, for years, really. And when I was a child, she was known in the family, obviously, as being a lawyer and a barrister and having achieved that, but she wasn't known as being a very nice person. A little bit like you were saying, Sian, sometimes people's perception of people, particularly women 100 years ago, if they forged their own path, they're quite often not popular.
They were difficult.
Yes, they were difficult. They still are.
Yes, they were difficult. They weren't very nice. They weren't conforming. They'd said no.
Yeah, they didn't do as they were told.
Yes, they might have said, actually, sorry, I'm not going to do that.
Exactly. And so they don't get a bad rep, really, don't they? So as I got older and older, and I realised more and more how pioneering she was, the story had been working in the back of my mind that I would write that, and that's came to the forefront of my mind really, rather than any business books, although I'd had ideas about leadership and things because I was the CEO of a new industry in this country and brought a whole new industry into this country, which was like scary. And but I just felt that this was the story I wanted to write, and I wanted to write to adjust people's thinking of her and the family's thinking of her, and try and make sure that she went down in our history as somebody who was a pioneer, and to reclaim her story, really. And then as I got into it, and as I said earlier, 4 husbands, 13 children, one of the husbands was 25 years younger than her, which, in those days, she was a girl. These days, it would be hard enough, wouldn't it, really? But those days, 100 years ago in India. So I just thought, well, hang on a minute, this story needs to go out wider, And so I published it about a year ago, in March last year, and it sells across the world. So, and I've got loads and loads of really good feedback. Sometimes people contact me privately and say, I just loved your book. And somebody yesterday in Austria contacted me to say, I just really enjoyed it. I couldn't put it down. And other people put up reviews. I prefer reviews myself because they put it up. Yes, it does. It helps on the algorithms. Yeah. But anyway, you have to, rely on people to do that, and sometimes they just don't get around to it or whatever. But it was a really interesting process trying to do a creative story as opposed to write documents and policies and things like that. So it's very different.
I think they're creative as well, but they're creative in a different way. Yeah. And I think the key to this actually is something that you said, which is, you said, this was the story I wanted to write. Yeah. And I think that's it, really, isn't it? Yeah. So many people, and this was me, actually, are coming at it. Everybody else is writing a book. I need to write a book. Okay, about what? Well, I do this and I do that with business. I need to write a business book. But actually, it isn't. It's this was the story I wanted to write, and I don't think it matters what it is. No, it doesn't matter whether it's a business book. It doesn't. It could be about physics. It matters not a jot. It has to be the book that you want to write. I believe. Otherwise, it isn't going to happen, is it?
No, you won't get the motivation. Because you do, as you were saying earlier, it's a long process, and Adelle knows. It's a long process. So, and you need to stick at it. So, if you don't want to do it, or it's not the book you want to write,
let's just talk a little bit about that process. As an overview of how you approached actually the sort of start to finish writing the book.
Yeah. Well, I'd done the research, and the research is a whole different thing. Which,
but that's the
start.
Is that the start of it, or does it evolve as you're going through?
Yeah, I think it evolves. I mean, the research for me, because it was a true story, and I did have to get all the facts and things had to be done. Really, I mean, so obviously, if you're doing something else, you might not need to do that. And that, for me, I was very, very lucky in as much that the British Library hold the British and India records, and so they have the Asian reading room. Much of that's online because it's 9 miles of books. Or you can go to the Asian reading room and pick out various documents. And I happened to come across a cousin who's very young but interested in family history, and she'd rung all the elderly relatives who are still alive, interviewed them and made notes. This is just for interest for her. But when I came across her, she'd had a lot about Cecelia Chatterjee and her life. So combining those two was good. But actually sitting down to write was the difficult thing. And if I'm honest with you, Sian, I spent a long time wondering and waiting for the muse to strike.
Just me
sort of wandering around, feeling one day, in the middle of the night at 3 o'clock when I can't sleep, the idea
something would happen. Something will happen. Yeah. It will suddenly, I'll start. And it will all just emerge.
Well, in fact, that's what happened in the end. It's interesting. I went to Margate Bookie, which I don't know if you know, it's a literary festival in Margate. I'm a board member of that, and I just happened to go to one of their sessions a couple of years ago, and I was saying, I can't get into this because, the muse isn't striking me or whatever. They were just like, get over yourself. And they know me, I think that's probably, and they just said, sit down and write. And I said, but I don't get that. And they said, you just have to sit down and you write and ideas will come to you while you're writing. And I didn't believe them. But because I tried everything else and it didn't work, I thought, well, OK, let's have a go. And that was the thing that worked. So even if I didn't know where I was going to start or what I was going to write, somehow sitting down and doing it, it was, like you're saying, ideas just happened as I wrote. And some of the plots and some of the thoughts and some of the things that happened just came to me as I was writing, which I would never, ever have thought. So it's the best piece of advice I was given.
That's my experience. Although I'm not an author, I spent a lot of time at university and writing essays, theses. And so often you'd be sat there, you've done your research, you're looking at it, and you have no idea what you're going to write. And I learnt that if I just sit down, and then it was pen and paper. We had sort of, I want to say typewriters, but really very basic, like Amstrad sort of word process. God, I sound old, don't I? But you were really doing it with a pen and paper, and I think that's also a really good place to start writing is with a pen and paper. Stuff happens with your brain, between your brain and your hand, but just to sit down and write, and that I learnt that. I may not know what I'm going to write, but if I just have to sit down and start.
Yeah, exactly. Because there were things like, how did she meet this man 25 years younger than her? What sort of relationship did they have? How did she marry him? What did the family think? That all came to me while I was writing, really. And I, wandering around the room, pacing up and down, nothing happened in my brain on that. But it was that process.
I think the other thing that I found useful when I was doing essays and things is to not say, OK, well, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to write however long this essay is. I'm going to sit down and I'm going to write the first 500 words. And just get it going. And very often I'd find something would flow out of that. So I suppose the research side of it, actually, you don't stop doing that, do you? Because as you're writing and the story or whatever it is, the thoughts, the ideas are developing, the theme is growing, different questions arise, which you then need to go and explore.
And I had to do that a lot because her life, she was born in 1876 and she died in 1947. And that was the period of India's fight for independence. She died just 2 months before independence happened. So all of that was going on in the background, the political stuff and all of that had to be a part of it because that would have been a part of her life, really. And all the very different women's campaigns to make women's doctors, to make women lawyers. They weren't allowed when she was born or first studying. Women were allowed to study law, but they couldn't practice it. And there was whole campaigns to get women to practice law. So all that had to come into it and had to be researched as well. Thank God for Wiki. I mean, I double-check things, but at least that's the first point of call for most of it, really.
So I was just going to come back to sort of not starting and what you think about sort of research and how long you go on for, because I think if we're not careful, it becomes we're forever in the research phase, aren't we? Before we've got so much stuff, we can't do anything with it. We've been researching it for 25 years. At what point?
Well, again, at Bookie, they said get on with it. You can do too much research. I felt because this was a specific life, I needed to get most of the life events in my head because the story needed to knit them together. But after that, then it was something that, a bit like you're saying, Sian, it was almost organic. That you write about things. I thought, what happened then? I bought loads and loads of books on India as well, so because I knew nothing about Indian history, and then look back in the books and see all of those, and then sort of weave that in. But I think you're right. You can research forever, really.
I just also want to go back to, you were talking about Margate Bookie. Now, I realise that, OK, if you're, a lot of our listeners are in the States, in Canada, all over the world, they're not highly unlikely to be able to go to the Bookie at Margate. But I bet there's something close to them because that they can perhaps tap into.
Yes, definitely.
So what is Margate Bookie?
Well, Margate Bookie's a literary festival that actually, you say most of it's online these days because it had to go online last year, so we're not even doing face-to-face stuff. But it was originally 2 or 3 days in Margate. They bring big authors down, they do various different sessions. Some of them, the authors are reading their books and talking about it. Some of them are supporting people to write books. You can do one-to-ones and things. All that's changed, obviously, since COVID, but that's the sort of thing. that, as you say, people should be able to tap into. They could tap into Margate Bookie.
Well, I was just about to say, you know, I think this is one of the things that COVID really has brought about, is that wherever you are now in the world, if you have access to an internet, you can get onto Margate Bookie and tap into that. The British Library now, I think they already had good online resources, but I think now their online resources are stupendous. So, you know, sort of get your research material and perhaps your support and inspiration in there as well. And now, you know, worldwide, the world is your oyster.
Yeah, it is. And the other thing I did was I went on a course by the Arvon Foundation, which I don't know if you know. They're a sort of charity that do creative writing courses. Now, this was before COVID, and it's slightly different now. But that I found really interesting about creative writing, and we did it in Ted Hughes's house in Yorkshire. Or his old house, he doesn't live there anymore, clearly. Have a load of people descending on his grave. But anyway, but the big thing I took away from that was conversation, because I think people get stuck on writing conversation sometimes, and they said if you listen to conversation, proper real life conversation, it makes no sense whatsoever. So you can't really transcribe a real life conversation. So just write your own, you know, and you know, keep the story in that conversation in a way that might not happen in real life, but you can't do real life conversations, you know, so because they go round and round in circles and up and down and whatever, you know.
Yes, and also there's so much sort of physical, you know, so much that we get from our body language, people's expressions. You know, I can have an expression of horror. You don't have to say anything at all. And the conversation can continue. And because of that, nobody actually, you know, if they translated it, nobody would know, or transcribed, nobody would know what was going on. So, yes, absolutely. Okay.
So that was a good piece of advice, really, that might be helpful.
So do your research, just don't do too much. Get your research materials in place, get your inspiration support in place. Sit down, write something.
Okay. I've written just start.
Sit down. Write the damn thing. Sit down, get yourself started. But that's not the end of the process, is it? And even when you've got what would be, I suppose you could call, you know, the beginning, the middle, and the end as a transcript. No, not a transcript. What's that thing?
A manuscript. Yeah.
You know, see, there you are. You've got your complete document, but that's not the end of it, is it?
Not at all.
No. And in fact, that. I think this is where I sort of get off the train, actually, go, I've done that, thank you very much. That's it, it's down, it's finished, thank you. But it's not, it's just the start, isn't it?
It is, it's a case of then redraft it. You will have to redraft, because you need to look at it, get somebody else to look at it, if it's a publisher or someone, and, you know, they'll come up with suggestions.
So is this the editing process?
It's the editing process,
and shall we distinguish here between editing and proofreading?
Yes.
Because if you're buying these services and you buy the wrong thing, it ain't going to work, is it? If you're expecting if you buy a proofreader and you're expecting editing, what you'll get is your spelling mistakes corrected.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And if you're buying editing,
it's around the construction.
It's around the construction and what makes sense and what is correct and what isn't correct. But they'll leave the spelling mistakes.
Yes. And sometimes those things do cross over in a little bit of a Venn diagram, but not much of one, but there you go. So, yes, I did 5 drafts, so 5 full edits of it. I know.
God,
I know. Sorry, Sian. Sorry. Just to explain. Sian is hyperventilating.
I'm worn out.
I know.
I can barely say it.
I've just written all this, now I've got to cut it all off. Oh, it's just outrageous.
Okay, let's take a step back.
Yeah.
How long is the book? How long would it take the average person to read the book? How many pages is it?
It's around 300 and something pages. Most people.
That's sort of about an average book. It's like an average fiction book, isn't it?
Yeah,
okay.
Really.
Yes, okay.
Most people have said they've read it in 1 or 2 sittings because they couldn't put it down. So I don't quite know, because what it is, it's not full of descriptions, because I didn't want a book full of descriptions.
So it's not War and Peace.
No.
And it's not it's not a little book full of ditties that's a few pages. It's not a short story.
Yeah.
It's an average size. If we looked at normal size novel, this is how big it is.
Yes.
Okay. How long did it take you to redraft that?
Right. So I just thought the book, the first draft was 134,000 words long. Okay, and I was told to bring it down to 80,000, but I didn't. I took it down to about 114,000. So I took out 20,000 words about. And I just thought, Bernie, get on with it. It's another one. You just do it and stop moaning. So I just got on with it. So it took a few months. I think it took from April to September. 2 years.
To do your 5 drafts.
The 5 drafts, yeah, to keep working and working and working at
all
it.
the time. And I think this is a critical point, isn't it? If you're writing a book, the drafts weren't expanding. They weren't making it longer. They were making it shorter.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just to tighten things up, take things out that were extraneous, take repetitive stuff out, because I didn't, and most authors don't, read back exactly what they've written straight away. So just sort of did it really, and just to keep going and say tightening it up really and making it a tighter story.
So the first thing that you did, should we call this the first draft? Is you sat down, you wrote it.
Yeah.
You didn't correct it.
No.
You didn't go back and think about it. You just wrote it.
Yeah.
So there we are. There it was in all of its full story and waffle.
Yes, exactly.
And repetitiveness and everything else that went with it.
Yeah.
And then you went through a series of 5 drafts where you tightened it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I thought I could have done that as I'd gone along, but because I didn't know what I was writing next, I thought, no, write it all. And then
I think also you lose the flow, don't you?
You do, yeah.
So
you absolutely
it becomes quite mechanical almost.
And you can keep that original version, that's yours.
Yes, that's true. Yeah. And also, to me, it was different skills, writing and editing. My grand plan originally when I decided to sit down and write it, was I'd write in the morning and edit in the afternoon. But that didn't work because I was just exhausted by the writing. And I just thought, no, just
you've got to do the 2 different mindsets.
Yes,
you need to leave a space.
You do
between your writing and your proofreading.
Yeah.
If you're writing, say, sales copy, something like that, something for a website or that sort of thing, it's about 2 weeks.
Yeah.
You leave 2 weeks between writing and going back and rereading it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I can't imagine. It'd probably be a decade before I could go.
It's just so emotionally.
Before I could go back and read that. So I think before you. What I'm taking from this, and it's sort of what I suspected already from my own perspective, although I don't think I was as clear in the thinking as to why I decided not to write a book, is that you get your first draft down. That isn't it. What you're going to have to do is go back and also throw some of your babies out as well, aren't you? Because you may have a line in there that you absolutely love, or an idea that you think is fantastic, and it's going to have to go.
Well, if you take my advice, put it in somewhere else. That's what I did. I like that line. I think I'll use it.
Yes, but you're going to have you've got this wonderful thing that you've written.
Yeah.
Wow, go me. And now you've got to go back and you've got to really sort of start cutting it down and going over, and drilling down, cutting out words, thinking about stuff. I would find that actually excruciating.
Yeah. I mean, I did it reluctantly at first, but I got into it. And I found it quite challenging.
How did you do it? Did you do it as I've got my first draft, now I need to cut it down, and I'm going to start at the beginning and go through, or did you cut it down in chapters? Did you break it up?
Yeah.
I mean, I realise you didn't sit there for 3 months solidly and not going to have a wee or anything. But did you dip in and out of different bits, or did you start at the beginning and work your way slowly through, or did you go, actually, I'm going to work on chapter 4. I know that I'm not happy about that. I'm going to work on that and tighten that up.
Well, I was much more, I think, starting at the beginning, and I read it all through once because I thought somebody had to.
If you're going to expect other people to read it through, you need to
go from beginning to end.
Yeah, you need to get the overall feel of it, don't you? Yes,
the plot and the development of the characters and all of that. So I read all that through, and then I did lots of different things. I sometimes did one chapter and faffed about with that. Sometimes I did a whole section of where she lived. She moved a lot. And I thought, well, when she lived in this place, this is what it was. So I did everything there she lived in that place, or everything about that marriage or whatever. But so I chopped and changed the process, to be honest, because I think partly because I was inexperienced, I don't quite know how to do it, and partly because it's getting into it, and the ways I get into it had to be different ways, because it is quite a hard thing to do, and quite a hard thing to say chop out all your own work, really.
Yes.
So I did whatever I needed to do in the way I needed to do it on that particular day, I think. Really.
Did you? It's just something that's occurred to me. I don't know whether this is right or wrong or not, because I've never written a book, but whether you you mentioned, where she lived and her husband's, and so her relationships and this sort of thing.
Yeah.
Did you review particular themes going through the book?
Yeah.
To make sure that perhaps it was correct, that the timelines were right, that also that you were getting the right flow. So did you, there was a theme of perhaps her we'll call them romantic relationships. Did you follow that through the whole of the book and go, okay, let's focus on the romantic relationships and see, have I got that right? Even though it may be pepper potted in different places.
Yeah, what I tried to do was, obviously all the facts are there, where she lived, where she married, who she married, when she married, and all of that, and when the kids were born. But then I thought, well, each relationship has to be different. I mean, relationships are different, but for the sake of a book, they've got to be different. So each man has to be different, and how the dynamic works has to be different. So, and how her character develops, because it starts off when she's 19 and finishes when she's 71. So how she develops the character, I worked through that, really. And then, because I knew a number of her kids, and one of them was my grandfather, and I knew him, and I knew what he was like. My mother was her granddaughter, so obviously I knew my mother. So there were all those things that I had to sort of draw out and make them a bit more, a bit more developed as the book went on, really. You don't want to start out with everything in the first chapter. You want to draw the things and build them. And so I did that with the themes. And then the other theme was how women become lawyers in India, or became lawyers in India. That was another theme I had to draw through, really.
This was a biography, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Did you write it as a story?
Yes, I did. Two things was that although all the facts are saying, the British Library have all the documentation about the marriages and the things, and we had some interesting anecdotes through my cousin Susie and through my own knowledge, we didn't know everything. She didn't keep papers, or she might have kept papers, but I suspect they were destroyed in the violence that happened around just after she died in the partition of India. So we did have to make a lot up in a way, but the main things that are made up were the characters, so were the sorts of personalities, and all of whom have passed away in the meantime. So we didn't know them, but to make them fit the facts, I had to create characters and create the development that fitted the facts. So it got complex in some ways, really. Although people have said it's a very readable book, so I'm hoping that I decomplexed it in a way.
I don't read biographies, actually, and perhaps I ought to, but I don't. I just they never really fire me up.
Yeah.
So this one does, actually, because it's different. It's unexpected.
Yes.
I expect to see biographies and autobiographies of Formula One racing drivers and famous footballers, but this is different. So I think the way that you could potentially go about it is to do it as a list of, and then this happened, and then that happened, and then this one went on. But you did. When I say, did you write it as a story? Did you approach it so that you were writing it as a story, as in almost like a fiction story, and so that people reading it would get it as that unfolding story, as opposed to a list of occurrences and achievements and facts at the time? Okay.
Yeah, I did, because I started out with a list of occurrences and achievements. Thought, well, I'll just write them up here and there, and I thought, well, A, boring, and B, hard to write because you don't know the context of all of them. So then I thought, this is a story, and I'm going to write it as a story. So that was my vision for it, really.
What was your intention for the book?
Yeah, the main vision.
What was your why?
Yeah, the main vision was to reclaim her story and tell it so that the younger generations of the family knew what she achieved. Because I know if you put it in a physical book, and I've given it all to my grandchildren, obviously they can't read it yet, but, they've all got copies of it, and they've got, a thing saying that you're a descendant of this woman, so be proud of yourself. And then, because the story was so complex, so challenging, and so much happened to her, and she overcame so much, I just thought this needs to go wider. And her story, a bit like you're saying, people aren't recognised for things. It's only if you've achieved, if you've a Formula One driver or whatever. But women's stories are often not told, and I thought I need to tell it, and people need to know what she did, really.
So looking at it from the point of view of perhaps a businesswoman, a lot of businesswomen at the moment thinking, I need to write a book. Yeah. I need to write a business book. The why the intention and the why is actually going to be critical to making that happen, isn't it? So, and there's nothing wrong with writing a business book to promote yourself and your business. I don't have an issue with that at all. But there has to be something. There has to be something there that is going to keep you going through what is, let's be honest, really, if you're going to do it properly and not get it ghost written or whatever, really quite an arduous, lengthy. Goodness me, you need a lot of stamina and perseverance and motivation. And for you, it was actually really personal, wasn't it? It was very much around your family, and not necessarily righting a wrong, but putting right this woman's story, so that her descendants and your family had. Could look at it in a different way and be proud of it.
Yes,
so you had this very personal motivation behind it, which. Did you set out deciding that this was going to be published and distributed and go out there to the rest of the world?
Yeah, not that. I thought I wanted to make it a book, and I wanted my generations of the family to have it. But to go out to the rest of the world only came through the process and the understanding of, say, marrying a man 25 years younger than herself. And
go Cecelia, right?
Yes, exactly. So all of those things, I thought she is a woman who is remarkable, or I call it the amazing life, and it was an amazing life, and that needed to go out much wider. I didn't know people would buy it, though, so I was thinking, I'm not sure about this. But I was stunned by the people. I've sold it in Canada, in America, Australia, across Europe, etc. People have bought it, and they've got back to me to say how much they liked it, really.
So for me, I think the key thing with this is it was a really simple objective, wasn't it?
Yeah.
There wasn't this, I'm going to write, this isn't going to be a bestseller.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not going to do this. I'm not having that amount of pressure around me. It was really, this is a story that needs to be told. Yeah. We are at the end of the show.
Ooh.
Berni.
Ooh.
I'm very, very quick fire. Your top tip for writing and publishing a book. Go.
Keep your vision. Thank you. Keep your vision. Know what you're doing it for, just like you're saying, and sit down and do it.
Berni Morgan, author of Cecelia Chatterjee, The Amazing Life of Cecelia Chatterjee. Amazing businesswoman. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Adelle, thank you so much. I'm forgetting where I am. Clearly it's lunchtime. It's not yet wine o'clock. not too far off. This is the Women in Business radio show. We will be back next week in the studio. We've got Rock Solid, and we're talking about avoiding New Year burnout, I think. We are. We will see you all then. Berni Morgan, thank you so much. Take care.
You.
Bye.
Tune in next week to the Women in Business radio show for more stories, ideas, and inspiration to help you grow your business.